Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I am an ISFP. You are watching my ISFP journey. Thank you so much for watching. I do ask that you would please subscribe if you have not already, and I also ask that as you watch my videos, you would please comment on them with your thoughts. The purpose of these videos is not just so that I can give you what information I have in my little brain, but also that you can share your information with me so that I can learn from you, you can learn from me, and people who watch these videos and read the comments can learn from both of us, and we can all grow and become better people. I had someone recently ask me if I would do a video on the superego of the ISFP. Now, this is a video that I'm not necessarily horribly qualified to make, so I'm just going to give you some thoughts on this, and I'll let you bounce them around, kind of do with them what you want. There is this theory called something like the 4 sides of the mind theory. And the theory kind of goes like this. Your primary function stack, which for the ISFP is introverted feeling, extroverted sensing, introverted intuition, extroverted thinking. So that primary function stack, your first 4 functions, is known in this theory as your ego, okay? And don't think of ego as a bad thing, like sometimes we talk about people having an ego and we mean that in a derogatory sense. This is not derogatory, it's just your main function stack. So if you're an ISTP, ISTP is your ego, or if you're an ESFJ, ESFJ is your ego. I'm an ISFP, so ISFP is my ego, first side of the mind. The second side of the mind is the unconscious, and those are your shadow functions. So the 4 functions that are left, basically, when you factor out your primary function stack. So for me, the 4 functions that are left are extroverted feeling, then introverted sensing, then extroverted intuition, and then introverted thinking. And that, if you put those together, is an ESFJ. Now, the idea in this theory is that you reach maturity by accessing and growing your unconscious mind. And you access that through the first function of it. So for me, that first function is extroverted feeling. So the idea is I can reach maturity by growing my unconscious mind, or the ESFJ within me, okay? And I have a friend who's an ESFJ, and he's a great guy. I mean, I would be happy to be more like him, and if that's what being mature would look like, I'd be all for that. Then the third side of the mind is the subconscious, and it is said to be accessed through your inferior function. So for me, extroverted thinking. And the subconscious mind is just your primary function stack flipped, okay? So for me, extroverted thinking, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, introverted feeling, and that's an ENTJ. That's an ENTJ. So for me, my subconscious mind would be an ENTJ, and the theory goes that when you access through extroverted thinking, in my case, or through your inferior function, when you access your subconscious mind and grow it and develop it, you have sort of opened the path to happiness, okay? So for me, happiness would be being more ENTJ-like. And then you have the superego. And the superego is your bottom 4 functions, your unconscious flipped, which for me is the INTP. So my superego as an ISFP is the INTP. Okay, so introverted thinking, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, extroverted feeling. Now, whereas the theory goes that if you can develop your unconscious mind, you can mature. If you can develop your subconscious mind, you can grow in happiness. The superego is not something you want to access. It's accessed through what in this theory is called the demon function, which is the last function of your unconscious. For me, introverted thinking. Now, I rather ascribe to this idea in general, because when I've listened to it like fleshed out and then thought about it in myself and in some other people I know, I can kind of see the evidence of it. So I'm kind of like one who will tentatively say, yeah, I think this is either true, or at least there's a good dose of truth to it. But I haven't invested myself in it deeply. So I'm not real comfortable like speaking on it in any kind of authoritative manner. But let me just say this. For every type, regardless of what type you are, the superego which according to this theory is accessed through the demon function, which are, if you're a follower of objective personality like I am, they use the concept of demons as being your two functions in your ego function stack that cause you the most trouble, basically, that cause you to get upset or frustrated or stress you out or whatever, okay? But in this four sides of the mind concept, your last function in your unconscious is known as your demon function. And when you basically tap into that, it's not necessarily a good thing, and you end up in superego mode. You can end up in superego mode. And in superego mode, the idea is that the superego, which is a bad thing, is trying to supplant the ego and take over. Okay, so what does it look like for the ISFP? This is the question that I was asked. Really, the person wanted to know, what does it look like when the ISFP goes into their superego or goes into their demon mode? Okay, so, it's because I really haven't put a lot of energy into studying this concept. I don't know when in my life, per se, I have been in a mode that someone who understands this really well would say, there it is, there, you're in your superego mode. So let me just say the things that come out in me when I'm when I'm being the worst version of me that I can be. I think the idea of the superego, like for me being an INTP, would be sort of a cold. Now, INTPs are great when you're an INTP ego and you're behaving in your ego mind, okay? But the idea would be, I think, that if you're an ISFP and you slip into INTP mode, that's bad, because it's like so completely opposite of what you are, that it's like maybe being like the worst version of an INTP possible, okay? So that might be like a cold, calculating, logical to the nth degree person who is plotting or planning, bad things for other people, something like that. Not that INTPs do that, but if an INTP were to try to be a bad INTP using their ego skills, it might look like that. It might look like, hey, I can sit down and do a deep dive on how I can really be a horrible person to you, okay? And so I don't know if, when I look back on the moments of my life where I feel like I was the worst me that I could be, I don't necessarily see myself as being very INTP-like. So I don't know, maybe there's some truth to this, or maybe I wasn't in superego mode, or maybe I just don't understand. But to really get at the heart of what I as an ISFP look like when I'm in my worst, regardless of what that is, I'm very judgmental. When I am in my worst, I really look at everyone else and okay, let me say this another way. As a general rule, I hold myself to an extremely high standard of conduct, okay, in every way, shape, or form. I expect myself to be a certain person, and I judge myself very harshly, okay? I set my own standard, and I'm not saying my standard is not informed by other standards. I am a firm believer in the Bible, and there are many things about the Bible that I hold up as standards for myself. But I have concluded that those are the right standards, and I hold myself to them. I do not need someone else to come along and hold me to them. I will judge myself, and I will judge myself usually much more harshly than anyone else would ever judge me, okay? You wouldn't know that about me probably, but if you could get inside my brain, you would realize that I hold myself to a very high standard. And that standard isn't just a biblical standard. My biblical beliefs inform my standard, but there's more to it than just that, honestly. I hold myself to a standard in other areas that the scriptures don't talk about at all, okay? So when I am being the worst version of me, I hold other people to that standard. Normally, I hold myself to a very high standard, but I'm more accepting and patient with other people. But when I'm being, horrible me, maybe it's superego me, I'm not sure, I hold other people to that standard, and I'm like, you are not being good enough. You are, whatever. I will think very bad thoughts of them. And normally my thoughts center around these three words: lazy, incompetent, stupid. Those are like my 3 words. Now, in a way, I can see, especially stupid, being something that would come out of an INTP mind, okay? So if the INTP superego for the ISFP, if that concept is correct, I can totally see how an INTP could look at people because they're lead TI, right? They're lead introverted thinking. For them, it's all about correct and incorrect, truth, error, intelligent and lack of intelligence. So I can see how an INTP could look at someone who's displaying a clear lack of intelligence and go, well, you're stupid. They might not have a lot of emotion invested in that, but it's just, they're just making a logical conclusion based on what you say and based on your behavior. You're stupid, right? Not saying that all INTPs do that. I'm just saying that I could see that coming out of an introverted thinking first mindset. So if I go into that introverted thinking first mindset, I'm still creating my own standard, right? But now instead of a standard of good and bad, a standard of values, it becomes a standard of intelligence. You're stupid. You're not doing what you should do. You're not behaving like I believe you should behave, and therefore you're stupid. That could come out in me. It does come out in me. I don't always say it, but I do have a bad tendency when I go into a mode I don't want to be in to think it. And I think of people as being incompetent, which could be born out of my inferior extroverted thinking, honestly. And I do view people sometimes as being lazy, and that also could be born out of that extroverted thinking inferior function. So I'm projecting on people that they're not living up to a standard that I usually reserve for myself and don't judge other people by. But when I'm angry or when I'm in the wrong frame of mind, I can hold people to that same standard, which is not fair, in all honesty, because there's just a whole lot of things going on in people's lives, and we rarely know even a fraction of all of that. And again, this also being a introverted feeling as my first function, or in other words, being a lead judging function person, or as objective personality would call it, a lead decider, right? A single decider. I do have a bad tendency to just lump people into these people are good, these people are bad, right? It's hard. It's sometimes, not always, but when I'm being the worst version of me, it can become hard for me to differentiate between, hey, look, people are not typically like all bad or all good, right? There's like a middle ground. They're bad sometimes and they're good sometimes. Sometimes they do nice things and sometimes they do hateful things. But I do have a tendency to be like, I kind of go through life going, oh, these people are really nice and they're wonderful. They're nice and they're wonderful. They're nice and they're wonderful. And then, there'll be this one guy and I'm like, he's not so nice and wonderful. No, he's actually not nice or wonderful at all. Actually, he's kind of a jerk. He's bad. He's just, okay, here's my group of decent human beings over here, but we're moving him all the way over here. There's absolutely nothing redeemable about him at all. He's horrible. And then when I'm really mad, he's not just horrible, he's stupid, he's incompetent, he's just an absolute, waste of breath sort of thing. Now, right now, I'm not thinking that way about anybody. I'm calm, and I realize nobody deserves to be categorized that way. But when I'm being my worst self, maybe it's a super ego self, that's how I'll categorize people. The other thing that I've known myself to do at times is to lash out at people and say things to them or about them that I would, if I heard someone else say it, I would put that person in one of those horrible categories. So when I hear people being regularly rude, or going out of their way to use their words to hurt someone, I will typically say this person needs to be pushed over here into the really bad person category, because that's horrible. That's never acceptable. You should not use your words to tear people down. And yet when I'm being the worst version of myself, I will use my words to tear people down, being the very thing that I really despise the most in other people. I have at times been violent against things. I've never been violent to another human being, but I have punched some things before in my life in my anger, which is stupid and I regret it now. I haven't done that in a long time, but I did used to do it when I was younger, and that's embarrassing and shameful. So that's something else that has come out in me at times. And then something else that comes out in me is just this really overwhelming desire to just check out and go away from everybody, which, funny enough, INTPs do spend a lot of time checked out and away from everybody, even though they can be very sociable people. I mean, with their extroverted feeling inferior, they do care actually quite a bit about the group, about their group, but they can, go off in a hole all by themselves. But then again, all IPs can. I think that's really an IP thing. So whether you're in your ego or your superego, if you're an IP, you have a tendency to just want to be alone. And so I do have a tendency, one thing that I can do, and maybe this is when I'm not being the best version of myself, is I can just kind of stop caring about people and just go, be like, nah, I'm just going to go do my own thing. I don't really care about anybody else. I don't want to think about anybody else. I don't want to deal with anybody else. I just want to go be alone. And sometimes that's fine. We all need to do that. But at some point, you got to come out and you got to show a little love to the group, because if you want the group to be there for you in your time of need, maybe you need to not just disappear for long periods of time and completely ignore the group and then wonder why they don't show up whenever you need them. Okay. So that I don't know, honestly, if I'm really getting at the heart of all this. I'm just kind of thinking out loud on this topic that I don't really have an overwhelming amount of knowledge on, or maybe a firm grasp on. But if you've never heard of this concept of the 4 sides of the mind, let me, there's an introduction to you. The person on YouTube that really teaches this the most is C.S. Joseph, and it's based largely on the works of John Beebe. And I know that he talks a lot about the communication styles of Linda Barron's as well, which, by the way, I've found to be very useful. I do actually appreciate the communication styles thing a lot. And then, the 4 sides of the mind theory is very intriguing. And I kind of think it's probably true, or at least, again, that some of it's true. There's some truth in there somewhere. But if you really want to know more about it, go watch C.S. Joseph's videos, because he can tell you more about that than I can. But those are some of the things that come out in me when I'm not being my best self. Maybe that's superego, maybe it's not. But yeah, I can be pretty judgmental, and I can be kind of harsh and mean. But I'm also getting a lot older, and I'm getting a little better about it. The judgmental thing, I think, is the thing that I still struggle with the most. A lot of that other stuff was a lot worse when I was younger. But if you're an ISFP and you relate to any of this, leave that in comments. If you're a person who thinks that you have a stronger grasp on the whole concept, leave some comments and fill in the gaps that I'm leaving, because I know I'm not doing a great job of explaining it. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you found this in any way useful, which I can kind of see if you didn't, but if you did, give it a like. And whether you did or not, would you please subscribe? I would really appreciate that, and have yourself an awesome day. Bye now.